You ever feel the land breathe with you out here on the edge of town? It's just me, a small house, a tired old barn, and 12 acres of stubborn grass that refuses to die. This place isn't big, it's not fancy, it's not some show ranch you see in magazines, but it's mine, my name on the deed, my sweat in the soil. My footprints worn into the front steps where the paint peeled years ago and I never bothered to fix it most mornings. Start slow. Coffee, steam against a pale sky, the sound of birds arguing in the mesquite trees, the hum of my old fridge, and the soft click of the ceiling fan above my head. Sometimes I stand on the porch barefoot just listening to the world wake up, and I think if peace had a sound it would sound like this. But that morning didn't sound like peace. It was 5:11 a.m. when my phone buzzed on the bedside table. Motion alert, front gate. My eyes opened before my hand even moved. My bones felt it first. Some weight in the air, some wrong note under the silence. Like a song gone out of tune, I rolled over, grabbed the phone, and opened the camera feed. The image was green and grainy from the infrared, but clear enough. A shiny white SUV sat at my gate bumper, inches from the chain. The logo on the side made my jaw lock up. Ridgeview Lakes Community Safety Patrol. We weren't Ridgeview Lakes, not by a long shot. That was a subdivision down the hill with the perfect mailboxes and matching porch lights and rules about which flowers you could plant. My land sat just outside their line, old county property grandfathered long before anyone had invented the word HOA. The SUV idled for a moment. Then doors opened. 1 to 3 men stepped out, all wearing navy vests with cheap plastic badges clipped on the front. One carried a tablet, one held a clipboard. The third walked with the attitude of a man who owned ground he had never paid for. He looked up at my house, even though the light was faint and the sky still dark blue before dawn. I sat up in bed. My heart didn't race, it just settled heavy in my chest. My dog, Scout, a gray-muzzled mutt with eyes too wise for her own good, lifted her head off the rug. Her ears were up, her body alert, silent. That silence told me more than barking ever could. Easy girl, I whispered. She didn't look away from the window. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, pulled on my jeans and boots, and walked to the small closet where the gun safe sat in the corner. The steel felt cool against my fingers as I turned the code and opened it. Inside lay my old 12-gauge shotgun, worn smooth where my hand had held it 1,000 times before. It wasn't some showpiece, it was scratched and old and honest. I held it a moment before taking it out. This wasn't about wanting to use it. I never wanted that. This was about responsibility. About being the only line between my land and whatever those men thought they could take. I slid 2 shells into the chamber. The click was soft, but to me it sounded like a promise. At the front window, I watched them. One man inspected the chain on the gate, another took photos of my fence posts. The third, the one with the swagger, pointed toward my barn like he was planning where his next project would go. Nope, I murmured to the glass. Not today. I took a breath. My chest ached with something more than anger. It was fear, to not fear of them, not exactly fear of paper, fear of signatures, fear of someone somewhere drawing a new line over an old map and deciding my father's land suddenly belonged to someone else, suddenly belonged to someone else. I stepped onto the porch. The air was cool and soft, the sky just beginning to bleed from black to deep blue. A thin mist hung low over the grass, the kind of morning where you can smell dew and dust and the faint memory of last night's heat. They didn't notice me at first. I walked down the worn dirt path, shotgun resting in the crook of my arm, barrel pointed at the ground. My boots crunched small stones loud. In the quiet on my right, the field stretched out wide and calm on my left. The barn stood like an old friend, leaning a little but still there, still loyal. When I was 20 yards from the gate, the man with the clipboard finally turned and saw me, gave a small tight smile like this was all normal. "Morning, sir," he called. "We're here for a compliance inspection, shouldn't take long." His voice rubbed me the wrong way, all smooth and official, like a radio ad. He stopped just far enough that the chain and gate was still between us. I kept my voice steady, slow, like the land itself was talking through me. "This isn't Ridgeview Lakes," I said. "You boys got the wrong property." The man with the swagger stepped closer, his vest read patrol supervisor, like those words meant law. "We've extended our safety oversight zone," he said. "Your structures are visible from community sightlines. That gives us authority to inspect." My jaw tightened. The county never said that. He shrugged. "We have board approval. That's all we need." I looked at their badges, plastic. I looked at their SUV. Its plates were from out of county. The logo on the door was just a vinyl sticker curling at one corner. Every part of me wanted to laugh, but the lump in my throat wasn't laughter. It was anger mixed with something old and aching. "This is private land," I said carefully. "You have no right to be here. You turn that SUV around and leave. Now we're done." The man with the tablet snorted. "We're authorized, sir. If you refuse to cooperate, you'll receive fines and possible lien action." There it was, the word I'd been waiting for, lien, the quiet bullet of the HOA world. I could feel Scout's eyes on my back from the porch. Even without looking, I knew her ears were flat now, body tense. She could feel my heartbeat as if it was beating through the dirt. "I'll say it one more time. I told them leave my property." The supervisor smiled, but it never reached his eyes. "Or what?" he asked. "You gonna call the sheriff on us for doing our job?" I lifted the shotgun just a hair, not aiming, just letting the morning light catch the metal. "No," I said. "I'm gonna protect what's mine." For a moment all 3 of them stared at the gun. Their smiles shrank just a bit. The air between us felt heavy, thick like a storm cloud forming inches above the ground. Then the man with the clipboard made his choice. He walked right up to the gate and put his hand on my chain. Start recording violations, he told his buddy. This one's going to be costly. That was the moment my bones knew it. The simple truth that had been whispering in the back of my skull since the first notification buzzed. They weren't going to listen to my words, so something else would have to speak for me. And in that quiet gray hour with the world barely awake, my shotgun waited in my hands like a last sentence I didn't want to say. The man's fingers curled around my chain like it already belonged to him. His clipboard brushed the top rail of the gate. Paper against metal, paper against years. I felt something rise inside me. Not sudden rage, no flames. This was colder, slower. Like ice forming along the edges of a creek, it slid into my chest and settled there heavy and sure. Take your hand off that chain, I said. He didn't. His eyes flicked to the shotgun, then back to my face. There was challenge there and something else, to a kind of bored confidence, like he'd done this before and always walked away the winner. The supervisor stepped closer. You raise that weapon on community officers, he said, and you'll be facing charges. You understand me, sir? Community officers, I repeated softly, tasting the words. They felt fake in my mouth, like chewing on plastic. You got badges from the county, you got signed papers from the sheriff. You got anything besides that printer sticker on your truck? The man with the tablet lifted it like a shield. We're authorized by the board. That board doesn't own this guy, I said. Doesn't own this dirt. Doesn't own this house behind me. Doesn't own my dog. Doesn't own my sleep. Doesn't own my peace. They shifted a little, uncomfortable. The quiet started pressing in. The birds had stopped singing. The wind had gone still. The world seemed to hold its breath just to hear which way this was going to break. Last warning, I said. The voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. You turn around and drive out of here, and we pretend this morning never happened. He squeezed the chain hard as something in me snapped, but it didn't explode. It crystallized. I took one slow step closer. Raised the shotgun to my shoulder, but aimed down at the packed dirt in front of the gate, not at them. Never at them. I had spent my life learning what lines you do not cross, and pointing a barrel at a man's chest was one of them, unless you plan never to sleep again. I clicked off the safety. The sound was soft, but in that silence it might as well have been thunder. The supervisor scoffed. You won't shoot. He was wrong. I took a breath, pulled the trigger, and the world broke open. The blast shattered the quiet. The recoil slammed into my shoulder. A familiar hard push. Dust jumped from the ground in front of the gate. Pebbles flew. The echo rolled out across the field, bouncing off the barn and racing down the empty road. Birds exploded from the trees in a panicked cloud. The men jumped back like the earth had bitten them. The clipboard flew from his hand. Papers scattered through the air like startled white birds. One of them stumbled into the SUV door with a curse. Scout barked once, sharp and fierce from the porch, then fell silent again, tail high, chest out. She was telling them what I already had. This line is real. This boundary is not just paint on a map. Smoke curled from the barrel, rising in a thin gray ribbon. The smell of gunpowder mixed with damp soil and cold morning air. It wrapped around me, wrapped around them. That smell says this is not a game. My voice came out low and flat. That was into the dirt. I told them the next noise you hear will be sirens. If you're still here when they arrive. The one with the tablet stared at the smoking patch of ground where the pellets had chewed a small, shallow crater. His face had gone pale. The supervisor's cocky smile was gone, replaced by something tight and angry and scared all at once. You just fired on unarmed personnel, he shouted, his voice cracking a little. That's assault. That's a felony. You're done out here, old man. You hear me? You're done. I fired at the ground, I answered. My camera caught everything. Your faces, your fake badges, your plates, the time, the angle, the shot. You broke my peace. I broke the dirt. That's all that happened here. He opened his mouth to argue, but his buddy grabbed his arm. Let's go, Matt, he muttered. Let's just go. They started toward the SUV, but the supervisor yanked his arm free. No, we're not leaving, he threatened us. He brandished a weapon. We're filing charges. We're putting a lien on this dump. We're his. Words died when his eyes followed mine. I wasn't looking at him. I was looking past him down the road where a swirl of dust had appeared. A dark shape moved through it, steady, not fast, but certain. The sheriff's truck. I hadn't called him yet, but out here sound travels. Gunshots especially. Someone had heard. Someone had done what those men expected me to do. Someone had dialed those 3 numbers. The SUV doors hung open. Papers still lay scattered along the roadside. The chain on my gate swung gently where his hand had jerked away from it. My shotgun rested back at my side barrel, smoking but pointed at the ground. The supervisor swallowed hard. Get in the truck, he hissed at his men now, but it was too late. The sheriff's truck came into clear view, blue stripe down the side, light bar quiet on top. He rolled to a slow stop right behind their SUV, blocking it from backing up. He stepped out, hat low, belt heavy boots, leaving stern marks in the dirt as he walked forward. His name was Sheriff Cole. I'd seen him in town a dozen times. Quiet man, careful with his words and his temper. Both stayed leashed unless someone tugged too hard. Morning, Luke, he said to me with a small nod. Morning, Sheriff, I replied. My voice felt calm even though my chest was still buzzing from the shot. He turned to the men. What's going on here? The supervisor rushed forward, talking fast, waving his arms. Sheriff, thank God you're here. This man just fired a shotgun at us. We're community safety patrol for Ridgeview Lakes. Acting under authority of the homeowners association, this resident is non-compliant and dangerous. We insist you arrest him immediately. He said the words like he'd rehearsed them on the ride over Cole didn't answer right away. He looked at the gate, at the small smoking hole in the ground, at the loose papers, at my dog still standing guard on the porch, at my shotgun held low and safe. Then he looked at the SUV badge and all community safety patrol, he repeated. You boys deputized by the county? I don't recall signing off on that. We have board authorization, the supervisor insisted. Our jurisdiction has been extended. Funny, the sheriff said, 'cause far as I know, jurisdiction comes from the state, not from a group of folks arguing about mailbox colors. The tablet guy shifted uneasily. The third man stared at his shoes. I felt my hands begin to tremble now that the moment had passed. The weight of what I'd done pressed down on me. I had fired my shotgun, not at them but near them, close enough to put a memory in their bones, a loud, heavy memory. I'd never wanted to give anyone. Sheriff Cole turned his head slightly toward me. You fire a warning shot, Luke? Yes, sir, I answered into the dirt. He grabbed my chain. I told them to leave. They wouldn't. They said they'd put a lien on my place and start inspection. I was scared, Sheriff. Not of them, of what comes after them. He studied my face for a long second. I let him see the truth there, the fear, the anger, the tired love I had for this land. Finally, he sighed. Put the shotgun back inside your house, he said quietly. Then we'll all talk like grown men, not like fools trying to scare each other. I nodded once, turned, walked back up the path, Scout dancing at my heels. She watched me lock the shotgun in the safe again. My hands shook as I closed it. The metallic clack sounded louder than the gunshot in my head when I stepped back outside. The sheriff had the three men lined up by their SUV. His notebook was out, his pen was ready. The supervisor was already complaining again about rights and authority in hostile residents. I stood at the edge of the porch, not moving, just listening while I did something inside me shifted. The shotgun had spoken loud enough to shake the morning, but I knew right then this fight was going to speak in other ways too, in paper and signatures and cold rooms, with flags on the wall and long tables where men in suits used words sharper than any shell. And I knew I couldn't run from that. I had to stand in it for my land, for my peace, for the right to drink my coffee at sunrise without wondering who was going to show up next and try to claim my front gate. Sheriff Cole's questions cut through the warm air like wire. He wasn't loud. He didn't need to be names. Where do you work? Who gave you those badges? Who told you to drive up this road before sunrise? The supervisor answered every question with the same, the board or our director or policy. His voice had lost some polish. Now it shook at the edges like it had never been tested in real wind before. When the sheriff asked again about county authority and state approval and legal jurisdiction, the man's answers got smaller. The tablet guy kept glancing at me, then at the small crater in the dirt, as if he couldn't decide which scared him more. Finally, Sheriff Cole shut his notebook with a dull snap. Here's what's going to happen, he said. You three are leaving this property right now. You will not set foot past this gate again. You will not send anyone else up this road until we get this mess sorted. If you do, we'll be having a very different conversation, the supervisor sputtered. You can't. I can. The sheriff cut in, and I just did. He stepped closer, his voice low but sharp. This land is not within your HOA boundaries. It never has been. Any attempt to enforce your community rules out here is trespass, plain and simple. You want to fight that, you take it to court. But you do not come on this man's land in the dark, waving clipboards and threats. He looked back at me. Luke, you'll need to come by the station later. We have to file a statement. You understand? I nodded. Yes, sir. The men climbed into their SUV in stiff, angry silence. Gravel sprayed as they turned around and drove off down the hill. The logo on the door flashed once in the new sunlight, then vanished behind a curve. The quiet that followed wasn't the old peaceful quiet. It was something heavier, like the air right after a thunderclap, when your ears are still ringing and every sound feels too sharp. The sheriff turned to me. You all right? I looked down at my hands. They still shook. Not sure yet, I admitted. My heart feels like it's still back there in the dirt where I shot. He gave a small, humorless smile. Warning shots are legal, complicated things. You know that I know, I said. I also know if they'd cut that chain and walked in here like they owned the place, I wouldn't have slept again for months. He studied me for a long breath, then nodded. Come in around 10. He said, bring your security footage, and Luke, yeah, next time call me before you pull that trigger. If you can, it's my job to scare people with badges, not yours. He left in a cloud of dust. The road swallowed the sound of his tires, until all that was left was the ticking of my cooling nerves and the distant hum of the town waking up far below. I stood by the gate for a long time, hand resting where the supervisors had been. My chest ached, my throat felt raw, though I hadn't yelled much. The shot echoed again and again in my mind, louder than it had been in the air. Scout pressed her head against my leg. She didn't know laws or liens. She just knew the taste of fear in my sweat. I'm okay, girl, I whispered. I think by 10 I sat in a metal chair at the small county station. The air conditioning hummed above my head. The walls smelled like old coffee and dust. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly, making everything look a little more tired than it really was. I signed forms, watched the video with the sheriff, and a deputy repeated every word I'd said at the gate. My throat tightened when the sound of the shot filled the small room, bouncing off the walls sharper than it had outside. You aimed low, the deputy Noted, deliberate. Yes, sir, I said. I'm not out here to hurt people. They wrote that down too by the time I walked back outside. The sun was bright overhead, burning away any cool left from the morning. My shoulders felt heavy, my legs draggy. I wasn't a young man anymore. The weight of even right actions pressed harder than it used to. The way home, I stopped at the small grocery store for coffee and dog food. People stared more than usual. Someone had already told them. I could see it in their glances. 2 seconds too long. Whispers that stopped when I turned down an aisle at the register. Old Mrs. Duffy leaned over the counter. "You all right, Luke?" I swallowed. "Guess so. Heard there was trouble up your road," she said, eyes sharp as ever. "With those HOA foolboys." "There was," I answered. "Might be more coming." She studied my face for a moment, then reached under the counter and added a small bag of sugar to my groceries on the house. She said, "You'll need the energy for whatever paperwork they throw at you next." I managed a small smile. "Thank you, ma'am." When I got home, there was already a letter in my mailbox. White envelope, blue logo, same words as the SUV, Ridgeview Lakes Homeowners Association. My name printed below in neat, unfriendly font. My stomach dropped even before I opened it. I knew inside was a notice of formal complaint and pending action. Words like threatening behavior, brandished firearm, danger to community safety, escalation of peaceful inspection, fines, legal review. They talked about me like I was a wild dog at the edge of their pretty neighborhood. They never once mentioned the time of day, the chain on my gate, or the fact that my land was outside their map. I stood by the mailbox, reading the words, my hands shaking again. Not from the echo of the gun this time, but from the cold edge of printed ink. Always feared bullets less than I feared paper. Paper can move through offices, paper can walk into courtrooms, paper can slip under doors while you're sleeping and steal your home without ever raising its voice. I carried the letter inside and laid it on the kitchen table like a dead thing. Scout sniffed it once, then backed away as if she could smell the wrongness in the ink. I made coffee and sat down staring at the words. They blurred a little around the edges, but the meaning stayed sharp. This wasn't over, not even close that night. Sleep didn't come easy. Every creak of the house made my muscles tense. Every set of headlights on the distant road pulled my eyes toward the window. I kept seeing that crater of dirt, the startled faces, the fake badges, the curled corner of the cheap logo on the SUV. Sometime after midnight, I walked out onto the porch. The sky was black and clear, pinpricked with stars. The air tasted of dry grass and old wood. My shotgun stayed locked in the safe, but I could feel its presence inside the house like another heartbeat. I didn't want this, I told the darkness. I just wanted my quiet. The land didn't answer, but somewhere far off a coyote howled long and lonely, and I knew this fight had stepped beyond my fence now. It was in offices and email threads and board meetings where my name would be spoken by men who had never looked me in the eye. Wrapped my arms around myself against the chill, and promised quietly, "I will not let you take this place." That promise settled into my bones deeper than the echo of the gunshot. The next day the phone started ringing. Lawyers I'd never met, invitations to discuss your options, bills for consultation fees. I hadn't agreed to. A polite, tight-voiced woman from the HOA office suggesting we could avoid unpleasant escalation if I accepted their authority and signed a cooperation agreement. Each call felt like another hand on my gate chain, another voice telling me to step aside. But every time I looked out at the field, at the barn, at the crooked line of fence posts my father had set with his own hands, my answer stayed the same: no. I didn't know how to fight them yet, not with words, not with paper, not with meetings and votes and motions. But I knew I had to learn, because if I didn't, the next time someone knocked at my gate, my shotgun wouldn't be enough, and I never wanted its voice to be the only one I had. The days that followed were long and thin. Sleep on one end, worry on the other, and a tight rope of hours stretched between. I met with a lawyer in town. A tired man with kind eyes and stacks of files on his desk. He skimmed the HOA letter side and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "They're trying to scare you into submission," he said. "Classic overreach." "Can they do it?" I asked. "Can they really put a lien on land that's not on their map?" "Not legally," he answered, "but that can make your life hell trying. They bank on people giving up before the truth catches up." I thought about my father fixing fence in 100-degree heat, shirt dark with sweat, hands cracked but steady. He never gave up on anything, not on this land, not on me. I felt that same stubbornness hardened in my chest. "What do I do?" I asked. "First," the lawyer said, "we respond in writing. Second, we gather evidence. Third, we tell your story to someone who knows how to make people listen." "Like who?" "Like the sheriff," he said, "like the county board, like maybe the local paper." The idea of my face in a newspaper made my stomach twist. I liked shadows and quiet and being forgotten by anyone who didn't already know me, but I was beginning to understand that silence wasn't safety anymore. It was an invitation. He drafted a letter on thick paper with sharp, simple words. "This property is outside your jurisdiction. Any further visits will be treated as trespass. Your community patrol acted without lawful authority." Seeing the words on my side for once made my hands stop shaking for a moment. We mailed the letter certified. I watched the clerk stamp it like it was a seal on a small shield. At home in the evenings, I replayed the camera footage again and again. Each time I watched, I saw something new: the slight smirk on the supervisor's face when he mentioned the lien, the board-looking tablet Guy's eyes, the way the clipboard hand tightened on my chain right before I fired the warning shot. Ty saved the video in 3 different places, printed still frames, and stored them in a folder labeled Truth. One afternoon while I was stacking hay, a blue pickup pulled into my drive and rolled to a stop. A woman climbed out, middle-aged, hair pulled back, camera bag slung over one shoulder, notebook tucked under her arm. She moved like someone used to stepping into other people's storms. "You Luke Carter?" she asked. "Who's asking names?" "Jamie," she said. "Local paper. I heard you had a visit from the Ridgeview Lakes Patrol." I wiped sweat from my forehead. My first instinct was to say no thanks, send her away, keep my mess my own, but then I pictured that letter on my table, the threat tucked inside the calm official font, and I knew quiet wasn't protecting me anymore. "Yeah," I said, "that was me." She listened while I told the story. Her pen scratched across the page, but she didn't interrupt much, just nodded here and their eyes sharp, soft at the edges, but steel in the middle. When I finished, she looked around, taking in the house, the barn, the old fence, the wide view of town far below. "You ever thought they'd reach this far?" she asked. "No," I said. "I thought if I stayed clear of their sidewalks and their shiny signs, they'd stay clear of me." "That's not how power works," she said gently. "It grows wherever nobody pushes back." She asked for the video I showed her. She watched in silence, jaw tightening at the gunshot, but nodding when she saw where the dirt jumped. She rewound the part where the supervisor mentioned leans. "There it is," she murmured, "the real weapon." That night her story went online. I didn't even know until my neighbor Kenny called breathless. "Luke, you seen this? She nailed them good, man. People in town are mad." I pulled the article up on my old laptop. The headline read, "When Community Safety Crosses the Line, Rural Homeowner Confronts HOA Patrol Outside Jurisdiction." My name was right there in the first paragraph. My road, my gate, my land. The photo of the crater in the dirt sat next to a screenshot of the HOA map with my property clearly outside the colored lines. Read comments piled up underneath, some angry, some scared, some saying our HOA tried something like this last year. For the first time since that morning, I didn't feel alone. Days later, I got a letter from the county board requesting my presence at a public hearing to address concerns about Ridgeview Lakes HOA enforcement boundaries. The thought of standing in front of a room full of strangers made my palms sweat. But when I looked out my window at Scout asleep on the porch and the late light painting my barn gold, I knew I had to go the night before the hearing. I couldn't sleep. I sat at the table with the shotgun leaning quietly in the corner, not because I planned to take it anywhere, just because it reminded me who I was. Wrote down what I wanted to say, simple words about peace and land and fear and the way it feels when someone tries to turn your home into a line item on a meeting agenda. I crossed out half of it. Too flowery, too angry, too broken. I wanted my voice to be like my shot, clear, deliberate, not wild. Morning came slow. The sky was gray and low when I buttoned my cleanest shirt and brushed the dust from my boots. My reflection in the bathroom mirror looked tired, older than I remembered, but in my eyes, I saw something I hadn't seen in weeks. Resolve that. The hearing room, the air smelled like paper and faint lemon cleaner. People filled the metal chairs, board members at the front, HOA representatives in neat shirts, the supervisor from that morning sitting stiffly by their side, avoiding my eyes when they called my name. My legs felt heavier than any bucket I'd ever carried. Still, they moved one step, then another, until I stood at the microphone. The room quieted. I could hear my heart thumping in my ears, but when I started talking, my voice came out steady. "My name is Luke Carter." I said. "I live at the end of Old Quarry Road outside the Ridgeview Lakes boundary line. My family bought that land when there was nothing out there but dust and sky. We paid taxes when there were no sidewalks to sweep. We fixed fences when no committee told us how high they had to be. I told them about the morning patrol, the chain, the threats, the warning shot. I did not hide the gun's voice. I owned it. I told them the truth about fear and why a man who loves peace would ever pull a trigger into dirt." When I finished, the room was quiet. Then someone in the back clapped once, twice, then more joined until the sound filled the small space. Not loud, but solid. The board thanked me. They frowned at the HOA reps, asked hard questions about maps and authority and why 3 men in vests were knocking on a private gate before sunrise with no county approval. The supervisor tried to talk his way around it, smooth words about community cohesion and consistency of standards. But his voice shook. Walking back to my seat, I realized something. My Chakan had spoken once and shaken the morning, but my words had just shaken a room full of people, and this time nobody could claim they didn't hear them. News travels fast when it carries fear with it, but it travels faster when it carries courage. Over the next week, more stories surfaced. A retired teacher from 3 streets over who'd been threatened with fines for planting tomatoes in her front yard. A young couple told their truck was an eyesore and had to be hidden or removed. An old man whose porch cross was ruled non-compliant. They started calling me not because I had answers, but because I had stood up and they had seen it. "Luke, they came after you too. Luke, they said the same words to us about liens. Luke, what do we do?" I didn't feel like any kind of leader, but I listened. I told them what my lawyer had told me. I shared the article. I shared the video. I told them to come to the next board hearing and speak. When the HOA announced an emergency community meeting in the Ridgeview Lakes clubhouse, the room was packed. People lined the walls, stood in doorways, sat on grass outside, leaning toward open windows. The board sat in a neat row at the front, trying to look calm. The president, a well-groomed man with perfect hair and a brittle smile, tapped his notes against the table. "We are here today to address recent misunderstandings," he began. A murmur rolled through the crowd. Misunderstanding was a small word for what had been happening. They talked about clarifying jurisdiction and reaffirming safety protocols and ensuring harmony. Every sentence felt like it had been polished so long it lost its meaning. Finally, someone shouted from the back, "What about Luke's land?" Heads turned toward me. I hadn't planned to speak. I stood near the wall, hands in my pockets, heart pounding. The president cleared his throat. "That incident is under internal review," he said. "Our patrol acted within reasonable—" "No, they didn't," a woman interrupted. "It was the retired teacher from the tomato story. They had no right out there." "None," another voice joined. "They scared my kids with their warnings about non-compliant play structures." Soon the room buzzed with anger. Questions flew faster than the president could answer. I felt the push from behind as Kenny nudged me toward the front. "Go on," he whispered. "They need to hear it from you again." My legs felt like they were full of wet sand, but they carried me. My footsteps echoed on the clubhouse floor as I walked to the small microphone stand. He didn't bring the shotgun, of course. It stayed locked at home where it belonged, but I felt it with me just the same. Not the weapon itself, the moment it had spoken, the boundary it had drawn. I took a breath. "You all know who I am now," I said. A few people chuckled softly. It loosened the tightness in the air. "I didn't come here to fight with anyone," I continued. "I came here because something's wrong, and I think deep down a lot of you know it." I looked at the board. "I'm not your enemy. I'm not trying to ruin your neighborhood. I don't care what color your mailboxes are. I care about a line being crossed. I care about strangers standing at my gate before dawn telling me my home belongs to their rulebook." I told them again about that morning, but this time I included the part I hadn't said out loud in the hearing. When I fired that warning shot, I said I hated it. I hated the feel of that recoil. I hated the sound. I knew it would replay in my head every night. I never wanted to be that man. I just wanted to be left alone on 12 acres of ground that my family worked long before there was a clubhouse or a committee. The room was silent. "I'm not proud of pulling that trigger," I went on, "but I'm proud I stood my ground, because if I hadn't, this story would have stayed quiet, and maybe next time it wouldn't be just dirt taking the hit. Maybe it'd be someone softer, someone who doesn't own a shotgun, someone who doesn't know how to stand up here and talk to you." An older man near the front wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. I saw couples squeeze each other's fingers. People nodded slowly like puzzle pieces, and their minds were finally fitting together. I turned back to the board. "You can run a neighborhood without running people over. You can care about safety without sending pretend officers to places you don't own. You can have rules without forgetting that behind every fence is someone's life, not just a yard." For a long second, no one spoke. Then the retired teacher stood up. "I move that we vote tonight," she said, voice strong, "to end the community patrol program and hire an independent review of this board's actions." Several voices shouted second. The president tried to regain control, gavel tapping fast. "Now hold on. This is not on the agenda. We cannot simply—" "Yes, we can," someone called. "We're the association. These are our dues. These are our streets." The room erupted. People stood, waved hands, argued, pushed for a vote. Right there, the smooth script of the meeting crumpled. The board scrambled. Papers whispered fiercely to each other. The president's confident smile cracked at the edges. In the corner of the room, I saw the patrol supervisor watching. His face was pale. His badge looked even cheaper under the bright fluorescent lights. He didn't look powerful anymore. He looked like a man who had borrowed authority and was being asked to give it back. In the end, they had to give in. They voted. The patrol was suspended pending review. The board agreed to an independent audit and to cooperate with the county's investigation. That was the careful language they used, but everyone in the room understood something big had shifted when I stepped outside into the warm night air. My hands were shaking again, but for a different reason this time. It wasn't fear. It was the release that comes when a heavy door finally begins to open. Kenny clapped me on the shoulder. "You did it, man." I shook my head. "We did it," I said. "All of us." The stars glittered above the subdivision streetlights, above my rugged road, above the field. My land didn't look any different, but it felt different. For weeks the fight had been inside my house, inside my chest, inside my gun safe and my mailbox. Now it had spilled into the clubhouse, into the boardroom, into the bright light where secrets go to die. The walls around their power had cracked. I could hear it in their voices, see it in their eyes, feel it in the way people left the meeting, walking faster, heads higher, talking louder than when they came. Eni drove home with the windows down, letting the night air wash over me. Scout greeted me on the porch, tail wagging, body warm against my leg when I sat beside her. "We're not done yet, girl," I whispered, scratching behind her ear. "But we're not standing alone anymore either." Out in the distance, a dog barked once, then settled. The wind moved softly through the grass, carrying the scent of dust and hope. And for the first time since the shotgun spoke, I felt like my own voice might be strong enough to finish what it had started. The official letters came weeks later, thick envelopes with county seals, formal language, signatures from people whose names I'd only ever seen on election signs. The investigation had found the patrol unauthorized. The HOA had acted outside its governing documents and legal boundaries. The board president resigned. The supervisor stepped down. The community patrol program was disbanded for good. I received a written apology. It was careful and stiff, but it used the word wrong, which is not a word men in suits like to write. More important than the apology, though, was the line at the bottom. Any previous threats of enforcement or lien action regarding your property are null and void. Inc. had tried to steal my peace. Inc. had tried to put chains on land that never belonged to them. In the end, Inc. also cut those chains. One afternoon, Sheriff Cole drove up my road again. This time there was no tension in the way his boots hit the dirt. He handed me another envelope. This one smaller but heavier, court-approved restitution. He said, for emotional distress and property interference. It's not much, but it's something. I opened it. A check, the amount enough to fix the sagging part of my porch maybe. Replace a few fence posts, maybe buy Scout a bed that wasn't patched twice at the seams. It's not about the money, I said quietly. I know, he replied. But it's proof they couldn't just walk away like nothing happened. We stood there a while watching the field. Scout chased a grasshopper, tail wagging. You did good, Luke, the sheriff finally said. A lot of folks are safer now because you refused to roll over. I didn't feel brave, I admitted, most days. I just felt tired. He smiled faintly. Bravery doesn't feel like fire most of the time. It feels like getting up again when all you want to do is lie down. That night the house felt different. The walls seemed less tight, the air less heavy. I walked to the gun safe and opened it. The 12-gauge sat where I had left it, cleaned after that morning, oiled and silent. I picked it up, felt its familiar weight, then I set it back and locked the door. The shotgun had spoken when it had to. One loud word carved into dirt and memory, but it didn't need to speak again, not unless real danger crossed my line. This fight had ended in meetings and votes, letters and laws, voices raised in crowded rooms. I stepped onto the porch with a mug of coffee. The sky was burning with sunset, orange and pink bleeding into each other. Sarge, the neighbor's calf I'd helped to nurse through a bad winter, grazed near the far fence. Scout lay at my feet, head on her paws, eyes half closed but always watching. There were no strange headlights on the ridge, no white SUVs idling at my gate, no poisoned words in my mailbox. Just the creak of boards, the distant hum of town, the breath of the land rising and falling with mine. I thought about all the people, whose names I didn't know, yet who might be fighting their own quiet wars with papers and patrols and committees. I thought about the messages I still got sometimes. Our HOA tried something similar. Your story gave us courage to say no. I played your hearing video at our board meeting. It changed everything. I'm just a widow on a small lot. But because of what you did, they backed off my garden. I wasn't a hero, just a man with a stubborn heart, a tired shotgun and a little patch of earth. He refused to surrender, but sometimes that's enough to light a path others can walk. The title of this whole mess, people online liked to repeat it. I warned the fake HOA patrol to leave. They ignored me, so my shotgun spoke for me. Every time I heard it, part of me flinched, because the truth is deeper than that. Yes, my shotgun spoke that day in a way I'll never forget, but afterwards I learned something bigger. My voice matters more. My no at the gate, my yes to the lawyer, my shaking words at the hearing, my quiet conversations with neighbors, my choice to stand instead of hide. All those small sounds formed a chorus louder than any blast. The sun slipped behind the ridge. The world softened into blues and purples. The first stars pricked through the sky. Scout gave a little sigh in her sleep. Truck passed on the distant highway, then faded until there was only the hush I'd loved all along. I set my mug down on the rail, leaned my hands on the worn wood and closed my eyes for a moment. Thank you, I whispered, not to anyone in particular, just to the land, the sky, the stubborn piece of myself that had refused to be driven off. The quiet that settled around me then wasn't the heavy quiet of fear I'd felt that morning when the SUV rolled up my drive. It wasn't the tense quiet of courtrooms and meetings. It was the old quiet, the true quiet, the kind where you hear crickets and distant cows and the soft thump of your dog's tail when you say her name. It was a quiet that belonged to me, and this time I knew one thing for certain. If anyone ever tried to take it again, my shotgun might speak if it had to, but my heart, my voice, my neighbors, and the law itself would be standing beside it. And that sound, the sound of a man and a community saying enough, is louder than any gunshot in the world.